Hi, Piers. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on the show.
Good evening.
Um, well, first, let me put it this way. First, there were four, and now there's one, and this whole conversation about African unity and the need for other candidates to back a single candidate in the CAF elections. What's really going on here?
What's really going on here is obviously a deal that has been arranged behind the scenes, and where, as we understand it, the candidate put forward or most favoured by FIFA has come to the fore, Patrice Motsepe. We know that there were talks in Morocco last weekend, hosted by the Moroccan FA. There were a couple of FIFA employees in the same hotel at the same time. We've yet to fully hear why they were there or get a full explanation from FIFA. But we do know that when Augustin Senghor of Senegal, who was the first to withdraw on Friday evening, he said that the proposal came from FIFA as well as the Moroccan and the Egyptian FAs. So there's certainly the hand of the governing body in this. Shortly after Senghor withdrew, Anouma withdrew, and then on Saturday, Ahmed Yahya of Mauritania withdrew. And what was proposed in Rabat in Morocco last weekend was obviously for Motsepe to be the sole candidate and for the three others to take lesser roles. And then, as I understand it, they just had to check with their heads of state in the week, this last week gone, just to explain that they'll be pulling out of the race so that this deal could come to fruition, which of course it has done now this weekend. Motsepe all alone, the other three candidates out, and now the only possible spanner in the works for the South African to become CAF president is, of course, if Ahmad were to be found not guilty tomorrow by the Court of Arbitration for Sport, where he's appealing his 5-year ban by FIFA for various ethics violations.
So, Piers, the Ahmad ruling aside, what mischief is this deal seeking to cure? Because that's a big question.
Well, and by which you mean what exactly?
I mean, what problem is this deal seeking? Somebody will say this is just a harmless election and the best man will win anyway at elections. Why was it so important to do a deal? What problem is this deal supposed to solve?
It's a very good question, and I must be honest, I'm not entirely sure what the answer is. There's lots of intrigue behind the scenes, of which we cannot be too certain of what's going on. I mean, there were even rumours of Fatma Sumura coming in to work with CAF, which are so wholly unconfirmed, and we've yet to reach out to FIFA for comment on that. But there's clearly a plan in place, and Motsepe was clearly the favoured candidate, as has come to fruition. There's lots of talk. There was a press conference yesterday in Nouakchott where the talk was of unity and the people coming together. But we know that last year FIFA worked for 6 months with CAF. They drew up a 100-point plan about how to improve the governance of CAF. And it's pretty detailed. Some of the points were to take powers away from the executive committee and give them to the general secretary. There are a whole host of things that may go ahead. And if Motsepe is indeed working with the assistance of FIFA, then we have to wait and see what does indeed happen in the future. FIFA President Gianni Infantino did say yesterday that his organization had helped, even if just a little. So there's clearly strings being pulled behind the scenes. And I think there are going to be big plans for Africa. We know that FIFA is very keen on the Club World Cup, the expanded Club World Cup, which was just a year or two ago apparently going to be bringing in something like $20 billion or worth $20 billion. We keep on hearing from Infantino, not just about 12 months ago, but in December at the General Assembly before the Confederation of African Football's General Assembly, the talk of an African Super League. Patrice Motsepe happens to be the owner of one of Africa's biggest clubs, the 2016 African champions Mamelodi Sundowns. One has to wonder, is his propulsion to power linked to the Club World Cup and the African Super League? And there's a great desire to make money as well, and they're trying to hopefully tap into Motsepe's expertise and business acumen. He is, of course, worth in excess of $2 billion. In the hope that they can get the finances of CAF back on track. There's a lot of work to be done, there are questions about how FIFA is going around in terms of interference in the organisation of CAF, even if it may well be that the governing body has bigger and perhaps better ideas for CAF, but we know that there's a lot of outrage on the continent about what FIFA is doing in meddling in what it has seen in these elections.
It's quite interesting because the Blatter administration was criticized for having puppet leaders in place in various confederations across the world to do their bidding. It would appear as if Mr. Infantino is finding himself within the same description.
Well, I think it's yes, very possible. I think Blatter, Blatter when he left, he one of the things he really complained about was the fact that he did not get to choose the people who were on his FIFA executive committee, and he said, look, these people were not elected or voted in by me. These are the people I have to work with. Now, what's going on in Africa right now is different to that. It does seem to be that the FIFA are trying to make sure that they get the people that they want. Certainly in the case of Motsepe, and certainly in the proposals that they've made. And they clearly fell out with Ahmad, who they originally backed right at the beginning. That did not work. So therefore, there's a big question mark about whether this next plan is going to work as well.
So as a final question, the post-Issa Hayatou football landscape in Africa, how does the administration look potentially under Patrice Motsepe going forward? What are your own, how do I put it, your own predictions as somebody who's watched African football for years?
I think there's going to be a huge focus on improving governance. I think we might just possibly see CAF introduce an ethics committee for the first ever time. There are no ethics committees in CAF. The governance committee, obviously there to make sure that the game is being well run and correctly run, only came in a few years ago. I think there's going to be a huge emphasis on money, growth, sponsorship, getting the partners back. We know that the image of African football right now is very, very low. And so you've got to improve the product. You've got to bring in the sponsors. And I know that CAF has not got all the money that it wished it had. Let's not forget that the massive $1 billion Lagardère deal was cancelled, which incidentally did happen at the same time as FIFA was working with CAF. So questions about that as well. But there's going to be a big emphasis on money. I'm sure there's going to be a huge emphasis on this African Super League, as said. I think there's going to be a big emphasis on infrastructure. And just basically doing things very, very differently. There are some good things that Ahmad did while he was in charge. I know his regime was hugely criticised, and obviously, at the BBC, we certainly asked some questions of his regime. But he did get some important things done, one of which was to secure the status of CAF in Egypt and to get a better agreement there, a better deal there, a better headquarters agreement, which they now have, which means that they can employ people from outside of Egypt, whereas beforehand it was very difficult to bring in non-Egyptians to the job at CAF because of the rules governing CAF's operations in Egypt. That's now changed after CAF signed a headquarters agreement with the Egyptian government and with the Egyptian government's backing, which is key. And so there are some signs of optimism for the future, but it's easy to talk. It's very difficult to bring everything together. People always have their own ideas. We know there's great division that goes on with the elections normally. We've often seen them split along Anglophone and Francophone lines. I think obviously one of the aims here is to avoid those divisions, to get people pulling together in the right direction. And if genuinely you really can get people pulling together in the right direction, then who knows what's going to happen. Question marks as well about Motsepe, we've got to say. He's a man who runs businesses, as said, worth nearly $3 billion now. His worth is $2.9 billion, according to Forbes, a staggering amount. Who's going to look after that business? Is he going to be able to make sure that he leaves? I heard some suggestions. His wife was going to run the business and his club was going to be run by his son. Is this really going to happen? And is Motsepe's eye going to be fully focused on CAF? Is it the fact that it may not be, which is why they brought in Senghor and Yaya as his vice presidents and Anuma to do a special advisory role? We don't know. There's lots to be answered. We've obviously got the elections as well, where the whole executive committee of CAF is going to change next Friday with Ahmad's regime going out and the new people coming in. So it's a time of huge change for CAF. It'll be fascinating to see what happens, but I really do think there's going to be a big expansion, and money is going to play a key role in it.
Thanks a lot for your time, Piers. Hope to speak to you soon again, but thanks for your very insightful thoughts.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.